Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth." But what if you could cut through the noise, the facades, the carefully constructed personas, and see someone's true character with just 5 questions? The ancient Stoics understood something most people never learn. You can't directly read someone's mind, but you can absolutely reveal their character through the right questions. Not because these questions are magical, but because they expose what people truly value, fear, and prioritize when they can't hide behind social masks. Today I'm sharing 5 questions rooted in Stoic philosophy that will reveal more about someone's true nature in 15 minutes than most people learn in 15 months. These questions cut through small talk, bypass rehearsed answers, and force people to reveal who they actually are beneath their carefully managed image. But here's the warning: these questions work too well. They create immediate depth and vulnerability that can be uncomfortable. They'll reveal truths about people that you can't unknow, and they'll show you who to trust and who to avoid with startling clarity. If you're ready to develop the Stoic ability to see people as they truly are, rather than as they present themselves, let's begin. Question 1. What do you do when no one is watching? The first question that reveals someone's true character is deceptively simple. What do you do when no one is watching? 1 or more conversationally, how do you spend your time when you're completely alone? Marcus Aurelius obsessed over this question in his private writings. He constantly examined his own character when he was alone, when no external pressure existed to perform virtue. He understood that who you are when no one is watching is who you actually are. Here's the psychological power of this question. Most people's public behavior is heavily influenced by social pressure, image management, and what they think others expect. But private behavior, anredema, what they do when there's no social reward or punishment, reveals their true values and character. The Stoics believed that virtue should be consistent regardless of audience. A truly virtuous person doesn't act differently in private versus public because their behavior comes from internal values, not external pressure. So, asking about private behavior immediately reveals whether someone's public persona is authentic or performance. Listen carefully to their answer. Do they talk about productive activities, self-improvement, creative pursuits, or meaningful hobbies? Or do they reveal primarily passive consumption, mindless entertainment, or activities they'd be embarrassed to discuss publicly? But dig deeper than the surface answer. The real insight comes from whether they're proud of how they spend their alone time or slightly embarrassed. Someone who's genuinely aligned with their values will talk about their private time with the same energy as their public accomplishments. Someone performing a persona will show discomfort or quickly pivot to more socially acceptable answers. Pay attention to what they don't mention. If someone talks constantly about ambition and success publicly, but spends all their private time escaping into entertainment, that disconnect reveals their true priorities. The Stoics understood, your private habits reveal your actual values, regardless of what you claim your values are. Also, notice whether they even have intentional private time. Some people are so uncomfortable with themselves that they fill every moment with distractions, social media, or entertainment to avoid being alone with their thoughts. This reveals someone who hasn't developed inner peace or self-knowledge. The dangerous insight this question provides. Within 5 minutes, you know whether someone practices what they preach or just performs for social approval. You know whether they're building something meaningful or just consuming. You know whether they're comfortable with themselves or running from themselves. Question 2. What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? The second question reveals someone's true desires versus their actual priorities. What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? This question, while common, reveals profound truths when analyzed through Stoic philosophy. Epictetus taught that we should focus only on what's within our control and release attachment to outcomes. But this question does something psychologically powerful. It temporarily removes the fear of failure to reveal what someone actually wants versus what they're willing to work for. Here's what makes this question so revealing. Listen not to their answer, but to the gap between their answer and their current actions. Someone who says, "I'd start a business," but hasn't taken a single step toward it, reveals that fear of failure is their primary driver, not genuine desire. Someone who says, "I'd write a book," but doesn't write, reveals that the identity of aspiring author matters more than actually creating. The Stoic perspective adds crucial depth. A true Stoic would recognize that you can't fail at things that are truly within your control. You can fail at achieving external outcomes, but you can't fail at making effort, developing character, or living according to your values. So this question reveals whether someone thinks in terms of external validation or internal standards. Watch for 3 types of responses. First, the dreamer. They describe elaborate fantasies that require zero failure risk, but show no connection to their current life or capabilities. This reveals someone who lives in imagination rather than reality. Second, the authentic pursuer. They describe something that's an extension of what they're already working toward. This reveals alignment between stated values and actual behavior. Third, the confused. They struggle to answer because they've never thought about what they actually want. This reveals someone living reactively rather than purposefully. The deeper psychological insight. What someone says they'd do without failure, risk reveals what they're using failure as an excuse to avoid. If they'd travel the world but don't save money or plan trips, they're using practical concerns as an excuse for not pursuing what they claim to want. The Stoics would say, if it's truly important, you'd find a way. If it's not, you'd find an excuse. Also, notice how they frame the answer. Do they talk about external achievements and recognition, or internal growth and contribution? Someone who says, "I'd become famous," reveals they're driven by external validation. Someone who says, "I'd help more people," reveals other focused values. The dangerous truth this reveals: you can immediately see whether someone's life is driven by authentic desire or by fear, whether they're living purposefully or reactively, and whether they're willing to work for what they claim to want or just fantasize about it. Question 3. What injustice makes you genuinely angry? The third question cuts straight to someone's values. What injustice or unfairness genuinely makes you angry? This question reveals what someone actually cares about beneath their socially acceptable persona. Marcus Aurelius constantly examined what provoked his anger, because he understood that anger reveals what you value. You don't get angry about things you don't care about. So asking what makes someone genuinely angry reveals their actual value hierarchy, not the values they claim to hold. Here's the psychological power. Most people will tell you what they think they should care about, but genuine anger is hard to fake. It comes from deep conviction about what matters, so this question bypasses rehearsed answers and accesses real values. Listen carefully to their answer. Do they describe systemic injustices that affect others, or personal slights that affect them? Someone who gets genuinely angry about injustices affecting people unlike themselves reveals genuine empathy and principle. Someone who only gets angry about things that personally impact them reveals self-centered values. The Stoic framework adds crucial depth. The Stoics believed you should only get angry about things that are both within your control and violations of virtue. Anger about external circumstances you can't control is wasted energy. Anger that motivates virtuous action is potentially useful. So their answer reveals whether they understand agency and control. Watch for whether they describe anger that leads to action or just venting. Someone who says, "Systemic poverty makes me angry," but does nothing about it, reveals performative values. Someone who describes anger that led them to specific actions reveals genuine conviction. Also notice what they don't mention. If someone claims to care about social justice but only gets angry about traffic and bad customer service, that disconnect reveals their actual priorities. The Stoics would say, "Show me what provokes your emotional energy, and I'll show you what you actually value." Pay attention to whether their anger is righteous or petty. Someone who gets genuinely angry about minor inconveniences reveals they haven't developed perspective or emotional regulation. Someone who reserves anger for actual injustice reveals mature value hierarchy. The dangerous insight. This question reveals whether someone's stated values match their emotional reality, whether they care about things beyond themselves, and whether they've developed the wisdom to direct their emotional energy appropriately. Question 4. What do you do that you know you shouldn't? The fourth question reveals someone's relationship with self-control and integrity. What's something you regularly do that you know you shouldn't? Or, what habit do you have that contradicts your values? Epictetus taught that the gap between what we know we should do and what we do and actually do is where all our suffering lives. This question directly examines that gap and reveals how someone handles the universal human struggle between knowing better and doing better. Here's what makes this so psychologically revealing. Everyone has behaviors that contradict their stated values, but how someone discusses this contradiction reveals enormous amounts about their character. Do they deny it, rationalize it, acknowledge it honestly, or show genuine distress about it? The Stoic perspective: a person of character acknowledges their failings honestly, takes responsibility for them, and works actively to close the gap between values and behavior. Someone without character either denies the gap exists or creates elaborate rationalizations for why their contradictory behavior is actually justified. Listen for 3 response patterns. First, the denier. "I can't think of anything," or "I'm pretty consistent with my values." This reveals either profound lack of self-awareness or dishonesty. No one is perfectly aligned between values and behavior. Second, the rationalizer. They immediately explain why their contradictory behavior is actually okay. "I know I should exercise, but I'm too busy," treats time as an external constraint rather than a choice. Third, the honest striver. They acknowledge the gap without excessive shame and discuss their efforts to improve. This reveals both self-awareness and commitment to growth. The deeper psychological truth. How someone discusses their own contradictions reveals how they'll handle conflicts with you. Someone who can't admit their own failings won't take responsibility when they wrong you. Someone who rationalizes their contradictions will rationalize breaking commitments. Someone who honestly acknowledges gaps and works to close them is someone you can build trust with. Also notice the nature of their contradictions. Are they about self-discipline and personal growth, or about how they treat others? Someone who says, "I know I should work out more," reveals self-focused contradictions. Someone who says, "I know I should be more patient with my family," reveals other-focused awareness. Pay attention to whether they frame it as internal struggle or external circumstances. "I know I should save money, but everything's so expensive," externalizes responsibility. "I know I should save money, but I lack the discipline," shows internal locus of control and potential for change. The dangerous revelation. This question shows whether someone has genuine self-awareness, takes responsibility for their choices, and is actively working on self-improvement, or whether they're trapped in denial and rationalization. Question 5. How do you handle being wrong? The fifth and most revealing question gets to the core of someone's character. Tell me about a time you were genuinely wrong about something important. How did you handle it? Marcus Aurelius constantly examined his own judgments and mistakes because he understood that wisdom comes from recognizing and learning from errors. But most people spend enormous energy defending their ego instead of pursuing truth. This question reveals which approach someone takes. Here's the profound psychological insight. How someone handles being wrong reveals almost everything important about their character. Do they double down to protect their ego? Do they deflect and blame circumstances? Do they acknowledge error and adjust? This single pattern predicts how they'll behave in relationships, conflicts, and challenges. The Stoic framework. The wise person values truth over being right. They adjust their views when presented with better information. They acknowledge mistakes without excessive shame because they understand that being wrong is part of being human. The foolish person values being right over truth, defends wrong positions to protect ego, and learns nothing from experience. Watch for response patterns. The defensive person struggles to think of a significant time they were wrong or quickly minimizes it. This reveals someone so invested in their ego that they can't acknowledge fallibility. The circumstantial blamer admits being wrong but attributes it entirely to external factors beyond their control. This reveals someone who can't take responsibility. The authentic learner describes genuine error, acknowledges their role, and explains what they learned. This reveals character and wisdom. Listen to their emotional tone when discussing being wrong. Someone who discusses past errors with appropriate humility but no excessive shame has integrated those experiences as learning. Someone who becomes defensive or dismissive hasn't processed the experience. Someone who becomes overly self-critical hasn't developed balanced self-assessment. Pay attention to whether they changed behavior after recognizing error. Acknowledging you were wrong without changing anything is just performance. Genuine wisdom means behavior changes to reflect new understanding. Ask follow-up. Did that experience change how you approach similar situations now? Also, notice the significance of what they were wrong about. Someone who describes being wrong about a minor preference reveals either lack of significant errors, unlikely, or inability to acknowledge important mistakes. Someone who describes genuine error in judgment, values, or treatment of others reveals both capacity for significant error and ability to acknowledge it. The Stoic truth. The person who can admit error, take responsibility, and adjust their thinking is someone who grows and improves. The person who defends every position to protect their ego stays trapped in their current limitations. The dangerous clarity this provides. Within one question, you know whether someone prioritizes truth over ego, whether they learn from experience, whether they'll take responsibility in conflicts with you, and whether they're capable of growth. These 5 questions, what you do alone and what you do without failure, what makes you angry, how you handle contradictions, and how you handle being wrong, cut through performance and reveal character. But here's the crucial wisdom. Use these questions with genuine curiosity, not judgment. The Stoics examined themselves as rigorously as they examined others. Turn these questions on yourself first. Your own answers will reveal truths about your character that might be uncomfortable but will help you grow. And remember, the goal isn't manipulation or tactical advantage. The goal is wisdom, understanding human nature, including your own, so you can build genuine relationships, identify trustworthy people, and avoid those who would waste your time or harm you. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." These questions help you identify whether someone is becoming a good person or just talking about it. If this video gave you practical wisdom for understanding human nature, subscribe for more Stoic philosophy applied to modern challenges. Drop a comment about which question you think is most revealing and why. And remember the ultimate Stoic lesson. Use this knowledge to build your own character first, understand others second, and choose your relationships wisely.